Welcome. This is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com.
And this is James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com, and we both welcome you back to another important episode of The New World Next Week, which, of course, you can find, as always, everything you need, audio, video, sources, and more at newworldnextweek.com. James, we will begin, as we often seem to do, with the crazed geopolitical situation. Massive changes, massive protests going on in Turkey now for 5, 6, and even by the time you guys are watching this, 7 days. So we'll try and give you the backstory as well as most up-to-date as I can give you, coming to you here late Wednesday night, June the 5th. Activists present list of demands in Turkey. Activists on Wednesday, June 5th, presented a list of demands they said could end days of anti-government demonstrations that have engulfed Turkey as trade unions joined in the outpouring of anger, shouting slogans and wielding banners calling on the prime minister to resign. Thousands of union members on a 2-day strike marched into Istanbul's landmark Taksim Square and central Ankara in a show of support for protesters angry at what they see as Prime Minister Erdogan's increasingly authoritarian rule. Police used tear gas and water cannons to break up the gathering in Ankara after allowing demonstrators to continue for some 8 hours. In a move to diffuse the tension, the deputy prime minister earlier met with a group whose attempt to prevent authorities from ripping up trees in Taksim has snowballed into the nationwide protests. Over 5 days, police deployed water cannons and tear gas, clouding the country's city centers. The Ankara-based Human Rights Association says close to 1,000 people have been injured and more than 3,300 people have been detained. James, we will include related notes from all around the world, from New York Times, from Blacklisted News, as we get into some of the horrifying images of these protests, financial fears as the street unrest shakes Turkey, and even just a straight Wikipedia entry on the 2013 protests in Turkey, just to give you a quick W5, which, as is noted in the article that we just read through from the CBC, I think it's interesting to note that this all essentially started because they wanted to tear up a park, James.
Or that's the way that it's being portrayed anyway. Yeah, no, I must admit this has color revolution type hallmarks all over it, from the social media way that that's being blamed for what's happening, the fact that the White House is coming out and seeming to slam Erdogan, who's been in their back pocket and been a close ally for a long time. So it's shades of what happened in Cairo in Egypt a couple of years ago. But I don't really see the strategy here. If this is some sort of manipulated color revolution from the outside, I really don't understand what that's about at this point, because Erdogan has been playing ball so much with the West lately and has been a NATO proxy in all but name there in the region, and certainly supplying and support for the Syrian destabilization campaign and all of that. So again, just like in Egypt, I'm sure there are genuine grievances against Erdogan, and there are people who are genuinely motivated by that, but there's always the question of the unseen hand from the outside. And Erdogan was floating statements that there might have been foreign elements behind this, pointing obviously at Baghdad, at Damascus, at Tehran. But again, is that possible? Surely. But I just don't understand what the scope of what's happening there is right now, which is why I'm interested to get Sibel Edmonds' take on this. I want to see what she has to say about this. But I'm also just sort of reserving judgment at the moment to see how this plays out, because again, often the action's in the reaction. That's
how it goes down. James, our second story this week is an interesting one, and it comes from a blog on firedoglake.com. Gary Webb receives a posthumous apology from a Los Angeles Times writer. Gary Webb is getting an apology from an unlikely source, the Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter who was drummed out of the newspaper industry after writing a story exposing the CIA's involvement in the introduction of crack cocaine in America, is getting a posthumous apology from one of the people who helped drum him out. 9 years after investigative reporter Gary Webb committed suicide, Jesse Katz, a former Los Angeles Times reporter who played a leading role in ruining the controversial journalist's career, has publicly apologized just weeks before shooting begins in Atlanta on Kill the Messenger, a film expected to reinstate Webb's reputation as an award-winning journalist dragged through the mud by disdainful competing media outlets. Katz and other establishment press writers worked overtime to discredit Webb and destroy his career. Part of the motivation seemed to be annoyance at being scooped by a lower-tier paper like the San Jose Mercury News, along with an instinctual defense of the establishment itself. The Washington Post's former ombudsman, Geneva Overholzer, would later claim that the Post had displayed a misdirected zeal in attacking Webb. Webb would later be vindicated by a Department of Justice report claiming the CIA did violate rules to help suspected drug traffickers, and testimony by the CIA Inspector General, who admitted before Congress that, oh yeah, maybe we didn't break off our relations with the guys who were bringing in the crack cocaine epidemic. Whoops. Despite being later vindicated, Gary Webb's career was destroyed by the backlash to his reporting. In 2004, reportedly depressed over not being able to find work or pay his bills, Webb committed suicide. The apology by Jesse Katz comes as filming is set to begin on the appropriately titled Kill the Messenger, starring Jeremy Renner, who you may know from being in Catherine Bigelow's intelligence-connected films, such as Zero Dark 30 and The Hurt Locker. The new movie, Kill the Messenger, beginning filming in Atlanta, getting into Webb's life and career. James, in addition to that story, will, of course, also include your own episode 117, Requiem for the Suicided, on Gary Webb. James?
Well, it is an interesting story, and that at least gives some of the background, but I think people have to read between the lines of that report a little bit. I don't think Gary Webb committed suicide. He was shot in the head twice, supposedly by himself, but this coming after he'd been talking about people scaling the eavesdropping outside his house and other things in the weeks prior to his mysterious death. So take that for what it's worth, but also take this article for what it's worth, talking about the seem-to-be motives, why they seem to go after Webb, talking about just instinctual defense of the establishment, etc., and not mentioning the admitted Mockingbird CIA assets in the media and the CIA sources of many of these media pundits who, of course, were very much against Webb and him revealing the secrets, which turned out, again, to be completely true and verified and on the record. And people might cast their mind back a couple of episodes ago on my podcast, talking about John Kerry. I played some of the clip of the late 1990s NBC Dateline report where they had John Kerry himself talking about, the government was involved and the CIA was definitely involved with drug runners, etc., and so it's all out there. It's all on the table. Everyone knows about it. It's all part of the public record, but nothing ever happens about it. So Gary Webb does deserve to be remembered and honored, but unfortunately, this is the way that if anyone who genuinely goes against the establishment ever does get their name cleared, it's only ever posthumously after a mysterious suicide and after much mudslinging has utterly ruined their actual life. So this is unfortunate and sad, but it's the way that these things work. And at any rate, the people in the alternative media who have been really honoring Gary Webb's work for decades also need to be recognized for their work in helping to keep that flame alive while the establishment was content to look the other way.
James, you mentioned the Mockingbird media, which I think, encompasses generally everyone here we're talking about, but even specifically including the aforementioned Washington Post. And what's that meeting going on right? Oh, the Bilderberger meeting. That's right. That also is connected to our good friends at the Washington Post. I wonder, James, if some of this too, as far as Jesse Katz is concerned, there may be part of it of him going, oh crap, this movie's going to come out. I better try and clear my name and cover my ass before this movie comes out in the court of public opinion. James, I think as long as we mentioned the Bilderberger meeting, I think it's also interesting to note, as long as we're talking about killing the messenger, that also going on as everything else is swirling and going insane all around the world, the Bradley Manning trial is also going on. So we'll include a couple of links to hopefully understand what's going on in the Bradley Manning case. Having said that, James, our third and final story this week, as we somehow, some ways try to end these New World Next Week episodes with a somewhat positive story. Komen cuts half its 3-day races, citing low numbers. Susan G. Komen for the Cure is canceling half of its 3-day charity races next year because of a drop in participation levels, a spokeswoman for the Dallas-based breast cancer organization said Wednesday. That would be, again, June 5th. The announcement comes about a year and a half after Komen experienced intense backlash after news became public of its decision to stop giving grants to Planned Parenthood for breast screenings. The funding was restored days later, though it did not quell the controversy. Komen said its 3-day races will not return next year to Boston, Chicago, Cleveland, Phoenix, San Francisco, Tampa Bay, and Washington, D.C. 7 other races will still be held next year in Atlanta, Dallas-Fort Worth, Michigan, Philadelphia, San Diego, Seattle, and the Twin Cities. Participation in the 3-day events has declined 37% over the last 4 years, according to the group. Participants must raise at least $2,300 to walk 60 miles over 3 days, and due to the amount of money that must be raised, 60% of participants only take part in the event once. The aforementioned spokeswoman said the decline came in the wake of also the economic downturn of 2008, but noted that the drop was a little more dramatic last year following that Planned Parenthood controversy in late July 2012. She declined to give specific figures for each year, but said other contributing factors for the last year were the economy and competition from other events. Having said all of that, James, I would like to think that this could perhaps be thanks to fantastic exposés like the documentary Pink Ribbons, Inc., which shows pretty much conclusively that organizations such as these are part and parcel of the disease industry. We're not trying to prevent any of these diseases. We just want to have big banners and have a whole industry built all around it, just like we always find out about, give your money to these organizations when crises and catastrophes break out. All that money ends up going to just running the machinery. James?
Exactly right. I haven't seen this Pink Ribbons Inc. documentary, but I really do want to, because I know that that there is something to that, and I'd like to get some more of those details. So I'll be definitely taking a look at that. But absolutely, it's interesting how they try to frame this in terms of the Planned Parenthood uproar, because, oh, wow, they tried to cut off funding to that eugenics-laced, eugenics-obsessed, eugenics-funded organization that was all about exterminating the black people back in the day. But we can't have that. Wow, liberals love exterminating black people in this day and age. So absolutely, this is hopefully a sign that people are clued in. Unfortunately, they're going to spin it as a sign that people are upset about the Planned Parenthood thing. At any rate, I think it is a good thing that people are choosing to do something different with their money than to give it to an organization that, according to exposés like Pink Ribbons Inc., at any rate, is basically using those dollars just to feed into the industry, the cancer industry, rather than to do anything about cancer agents themselves. And of course, we've talked about health and food and self-sufficiency and getting off the big pharma, big agri grid many times on this broadcast and on our other respective works, and we'll just mention it here again, that ultimately your health is your responsibility. It rests in your hands, and that means getting off of the big agri, big pharma grid as much as possible. And it's almost impossible to get rid of all of these chemicals that they're flooding our environment with these days, even down to the ink in the receipts on your purchases have the BPA in them, and things like this. So it's getting harder and harder to avoid all the crap that they're trying to deluge us with, and that's why I think we have to try harder and harder to rid ourselves of this horrific stain that they're trying to flood our world with. Meanwhile, they're trying to distract us from all of that with these types of run for the cure things that raise large amounts of money that do absolutely nothing towards actually curing anything.
Mm-hmm. James, it was interesting because one, I'd pretty much completely forgotten about the whole Planned Parenthood controversy and Komen for the cure. Another interesting thing I just thought of as you were talking, in this past week, there was something, again, as things start on Twitter and they start to snowball, there was some campaign that was essentially #ExposePP, Planned Parenthood. And it was people essentially talking about its undeniable eugenics roots. But it was like a lot of things on Twitter, it was taken over by the well-meaning liberals who loved killing people and who essentially kind of hijacked that Twitter hashtag. We'll include a link to that story, James. As we start to wrap up here, we do want to say a quick note about our good friends at ParadigmShift.tv, James.
That's right. For those out there who don't know, ParadigmShift.tv plays New World Next Week and other Corbett Report materials, as well as other truth documentaries and the like, on its Sky Channel 191 at selected times. Information about that is at ParadigmShift.tv, but recently they have lost their sponsor, so they're likely to go off the air unless they can raise some funds. Some more information about how to actually donate to them will be there at the site. We'll also put the link down in the show notes so that you can go and follow them. If you do get us through Sky Channel 191, please do consider donating so that you can help to keep this on the air there in Europe.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing. And again, just to James, I think, constantly every week I'm humbled by being involved in this as I see the view counts, and I will be at an event here in Portland, and some guy runs up to me the other night and he was just like, "Hey man, love your videos." Just like, oh my God, it's fantastic, and I appreciate it every week.
I would if that ever happened to me, but it doesn't happen much on the streets of Japan. Oh well. At any rate, we do appreciate all the support from all the people out there, and as always, I appreciate your help, James. So thanks again for another 3 stories.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Take care.